two identical car engines, one in the US, one overseas. Your manual calls for 0W-20 oil in the US, while across Europe and Australia the same engine is prescribed 5W-30. This is not about climate, engineering, or geography. It is about EPA fuel economy targets, million-dollar penalties, and paperwork that locks manufacturers and your engine into a thinner oil. The official reason sounds reassuring, but the long-term consequences might cost you far more than you think. So why does your car's future depend on a number in a government file? Every oil bottle on the shelf has a code stamped on the front, something like 0W-20 or 5W-30, but that string of numbers tells the whole story about what is flowing through your engine. The first number, followed by a W, stands for winter. It describes how easily the oil moves when it is cold, right after you start the car on a chilly morning. A lower number here means the oil stays thinner at low temperatures, so it can reach critical engine parts faster. For example, 0W oil flows more easily than 5W when the engine is cold. The second number is the key for what happens once your engine heats up. That is the viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius, about 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature where your engine spends most of its time. A 20-weight oil, like in 0W-20, is much thinner at operating temperature than a 30-weight oil found in 5W-30. The thicker the oil at high temperature, the stronger the protective film between moving parts. That means 5W-30 keeps a noticeably thicker cushion inside the engine when it is hot, compared to 0W-20. These numbers are set by the SAE 300 standard, which is how every major oil gets rated. The difference is not just academic. When you move from 5W-30 down to 0W-20, you are actually reducing internal friction. That can mean a small bump in fuel economy because the engine does not have to work as hard to turn the crank and spin the bearings. But thinner oil also means a thinner film at high temperatures. And that is where the debate between efficiency and protection really begins. Understanding what those numbers mean is the foundation for everything that comes next. Automakers face a simple equation. Every fraction of a mile per gallon counts, and missing the mark can cost millions. Under USCAFE rules, for each 0.1 miles per gallon a manufacturer falls short of the fleet target, the government can fine them over $14 per vehicle. Multiplied across hundreds of thousands of cars, that adds up fast. Even a 0.5 miles per gallon shortfall on a popular model could run into tens of millions of dollars in penalties. That is why the numbers on the oil jug matter so much. National Academy's research and EPA technical reports both confirm that switching from a 5W-30 to a 0W-20 oil can improve measured fuel economy by about 0.5 to 1% on the official test cycles. For a mid-size sedan, that can mean a bump of roughly 0.5 to 1 mile per gallon on paper. It is not a huge difference for the driver, but it is enough to push a manufacturer over the compliance line and avoid a huge fine. That makes low-viscosity oil more than just a technical choice. It is a compliance tool, baked into the certification paperwork and the EPA test results. As a result, the oil spec in the manual is not just about engine needs. It is a line item in a regulatory strategy designed to maximize fuel economy scores and minimize financial risk. The incentive is clear: squeeze every drop of efficiency from the test cycle, even if it means running thinner oil than engineers might otherwise prefer for long-term durability. Once an automaker locks in an oil grade for US certification, that choice is stamped into the official paperwork, right alongside the fuel economy numbers and emissions data reported to regulators. The oil viscosity is not just a suggestion for the technician. It becomes the baseline for every EPA and NHTSA test cycle the vehicle must pass. Changing that number later is not a matter of updating a page in the manual. It is a regulatory process that can take months, involving new engineering validation, fresh rounds of dyno testing, and amended filings to federal agencies. For a company building hundreds of thousands of cars, even a small change in paperwork triggers a cascade of new compliance steps, label updates, and production delays. That is why owner manuals and window stickers almost never change mid-generation, even when field experience or engineering feedback points toward a thicker oil for better durability. The service bulletins tell the real story. In the fine print, Toyota and Honda both include lines like, If SAE 0W-20 is not available, SAE 5W-30 may be used, provided it meets API and ILSAC specifications. Replace with 0W-20 at the next oil change. It is a quiet admission that the engine can handle 5W-30 without issue, but the official spec stays frozen because the cost and hassle of recertifying the whole model just to recommend a thicker oil is not worth it for the manufacturer. As one retired compliance engineer put it, once you have certified a car on a certain oil, you are married to that spec for years. Changing it means new tests, new paperwork, and months of lost time. Most companies just do not bother unless there is a major problem. The result is simple. Manuals and labels stick to the original viscosity, while the real-world advice from the people who know engines best quietly bends to match what actually protects the hardware. Independent lab work measured how different oils actually hold up under real-world heat. In a controlled study, 0W-20 oils were subjected to sustained high-temperature cycles that simulate the stress engines face in places like Texas or Arizona. The results were clear. After just 5,000 to 7,000 miles of hot operation, 0W-20 lost 10 to 15% of its original viscosity. That means the oil thinned noticeably, offering less protection than when it was fresh out of the bottle. By comparison, high-quality 5W-30 oils maintained their viscosity much better under the same conditions, with far less shear loss over the same mileage. These numbers line up with what many mechanics see. Thin oils can break down faster in heat, leaving engines with a weaker protective film right when they need it most. Manufacturer charts for hot regions such as Australia and the Middle East routinely recommend 5W-30 or even 5W-40, and that backs up what the lab data shows. The evidence is right there in the numbers. When the temperature climbs, thinner oil simply does not hold up as well. Imagine two identical Camrys, both equipped with the same 2.5-liter 2ARFE engine, each driven for 100,000 miles through the heat and traffic of the southern US. The only difference is one ran on 0W-20, the other on 5W-30. When mechanics pulled the valve covers, the differences inside told their own story. The engine that ran on 0W-20 posted a slight edge in fuel economy, about 0.7 miles per gallon better over the long haul. But oil analysis revealed a trade-off. The 0W-20 engine showed noticeably higher levels of wear metals, roughly 40% more than its 5W-30 counterpart. Under the valve cover, the 0W-20 motor had a light varnish coating, a sign of oil oxidation and heat stress, while the 5W-30 engine stayed cleaner, with less discoloration and deposit buildup. An independent mechanic summed it up. That tiny bump in miles per gallon looks good on paper, but it comes at the cost of more metal in the oil and more gunk on the parts. If you plan to keep the car past 100,000 miles, those numbers start to matter. Turbocharged engines put oil through a torture test that most drivers never see. Inside a small turbo like Honda's 1.5-liter, oil is forced through narrow passages at high speed and then blasted with heat every time the boost comes up. When these engines run on 0W-20, the oil film can get dangerously thin at high temperatures, especially during long highway pulls or stop-and-go traffic in the summer. Mechanics and oil labs have seen the pattern. Oil analysis from these engines often shows elevated metal particles, signs of turbo-bearing wear, and higher oil consumption when running the thinnest grades. Many owners report topping off more frequently, sometimes burning through a quart before the next oil change. But when the same engine is switched to a high-quality 5W-30, the numbers shift. Oil consumption drops, sometimes by 1/3, and lab reports show a clear reduction in wear metals. The thicker oil stands up better to the heat and pressure, protecting those tiny turbo bearings that can cost thousands if they fail. For anyone driving a small turbo in real-world heat, this is where the debate over viscosity stops being theory and starts showing up on the repair bill. Right now, a single oil grade often stands between regulatory demands and real-world engine health. As fuel economy targets tighten, the gap between what is prescribed and what protects widens. For every driver, the real decision is not just about oil, it is about who gets to define durability. Share your take below.